Welcome back to our special pre-budget series, Balancing Growth and Deficit. This is the Economist Roundtable, and I've been speaking with Dr. Rakesh, Mohan, Dr. Govinda, Ajit, Ranade, and Prasanna. Well, Dr. Mohan, first that question which we were discussing with Ajit just before the break. Do you think that instead of trying to juggle growth and deficit, it would be good to impose this fresh tax, the long-term capital gains, which, as Ajit said, was taken off on shares because of the Mauritius argument that there is a discrepancy between the way we treat foreigners and domestic share investors. Now that that advantage for the Mauritian investors has been grandfathered, time to impose this tax so that we can meet both growth and discipline, fiscal discipline?
Well, I don't have a sense of the kind of revenue you'd get from this.
Okay.
So whereas I would support the idea in general, and particularly since this is coming from the private sector, so I don't have a difference with that, but I don't have a good idea of how much revenue you'll actually get to solve that kind of problem.
Okay.
I did want to make another point in terms of manufacturing.
Yes, sir.
That the expected, given the increase in global demand that is now expected over the next couple of years, that this is indeed, again, a good time for reviving manufacturing growth. And we come back to the issue that I've often talked about, that is the Indian exchange rate. It is really quite bizarre that the nominal Indian exchange rate with the dollar has remained about constant for almost 3 years now. So the real exchange rate index, the 6-country index, is about 130 compared to, that is 30% over 2004-05. And the 36-country index is around 115, 116. And in the last 3 years, at least, or 4 years or so, countries like China, Japan, UK, Korea, Brazil have all depreciated in real terms. So it's almost a no-brainer that the Indian manufacturing sector is suffering a great deal from the appreciation, almost consistent appreciation of the real exchange rate.
Okay.
And this is reflected actually the merchandise trade deficit of just under 10% of GDP. It's about 8 or 9% or thereabouts.
Okay.
Of course, it's balanced by the software and so on, the invisibles.
Yep.
But my point is that even in the case of software now, we're beginning to suffer because of the exchange rate.
Okay.
So the kind of point that also Dr. Govinda was making and Ajit Ranade, that look, manufacturing, just somehow we've lost the focus of manufacturing.
Okay.
And so whatever measures that the budget process can come up with, and I would once again say that, look, if we can do demonetization, why can't we do big labor reforms in this coming fiscal year?
Okay.
Because that is really essential. A lot of manufacturing is moving out of China. It's all going to Vietnam, Philippines, Cambodia, Bangladesh, but not to India.
Okay. So I'll
and
try
therefore, it is absolutely essential to do labor reforms. And I have one suggestion.
Yes,
let me just give you one suggestion on that. That it seems to me that one feasible way of doing labor reforms is actually to say, look, we will apply the existing laws to everyone who is currently employed in organized manufacturing. And the new, that is like a grandfather current employees, since only about 10 million of them.
Okay.
And all new employees will be subject to new laws.
Okay.
This is what we did when we went to the new pension system.
Sure. That's right. Yeah, I was going to ask you about the focus between, the focus of growth as well. I mean, all points well taken. Basically, what you're saying is that aside from the growth of fiscal discipline issue, there are external issues in terms of economy that the government has to set right. Ajit also speaking to some extent on that. Dr. Rao, first of all, would you have an idea of this revenue foregone? I tried to look up this revenue foregone and I saw some 65,000 crore number, but that was not only long-term capital gains. On long-term capital gains, revenue foregone, Ajit quotes a number of 45,000 crore from an EPW article, but I don't have a handle on it. Do you, Dr. Rao?
I don't think it's easy to estimate those numbers because it's only the department can do it because they have the data. But, apart from the issue of numbers, see, I mean, why should the tax policy deal with so many objectives?
Okay.
The tax policy is not meant to, create a wedge between different, financial instruments and, sort of affect the consumer choice on that particular thing. The tax department should be neutral, taxes should be neutral.
Fair point, sir.
And for that reason alone, I think long-term capital gains on equity-based investment must be there. There is, and of course, this would, even if it brings in 45,000 crores, when you have the this thing, that when you have the taxes, there may be some changes in the base. Okay. But even if you have 45,000 crores, that's a positive. But that's an important point, and then we do need to have that. Okay. And on the other issue, in fact, we have been having too many objectives on tax policy.
Okay.
And in 2015-16 budget, the finance minister said he will rationalize the tax preferences and reduce the corporate tax to 25%.
Okay.
Rationalization of tax, there are all sorts of tax preferences given. And that has to be, I think this is the time that they should do it. If you, that's again is an important way in which you can revive the industrial climate in the country. Okay. And not much is being talked about this. Yes. But that's, and again, I agree with Dr. Rakesh Mohan that, we need to have a more realistic exchange rate policy. We can't be overvaluing our rupee all the time. There has to be labor reform, which is an extremely important thing now. And if, given the fact that there is, sort of the big elephant in the room is, is to revive the industrial climate, yes, we do need to really have a multiple, sort of policy interventions. And fiscal deficit is not the answer, expanding the fiscal deficit envelope is not the answer to that.
Fair point, sir. Ajit, we are running out of time, but very quickly, I thought I could make this the entire 10-minute theme. Farm versus infra. Considering that we will not have resources for everything, where should the accent be? Farm or infra?
No, obviously by the way, here is the thought for everybody. The low inflation of 2017 or 16-17 was because of food prices. So the overall inflation rate was 2.5, but food inflation was even lower. So that is like a net subsidy from the farm sector to the rest of the economy. Okay. So it is wrong to say that, in fact, India is one of the only very, very few countries in the world which is a disprotected agriculture. And the consumption spending is sputtering partly because rural consumption demand is going down. So I think infra in rural areas probably is a much bigger priority than infra in non-rural. So rural area infra as well as farm focus should be the theme of the budget, I think. Okay.
Well, actually out of time, but Prasanna, so you get the last word. Any other point that you can add for this growth deficit balance? And more importantly, do you think in this budget the government should give a longer term view? The FRBM report is gathering dust. Would you say that it's about time the government said whether it is adopting that roadmap or not? I mean, even if they renege and go to 3.2% for FY19, do you think that long-term roadmap is going to be extremely vital?
Yeah, that's right. I think that is the more important issue which the bond market is also facing. So, if you look at this year, for example, our sense is that in terms of expenditure, the government is not going to spend more. Almost all the slippage is going to come from the revenue side, a lot of it because of GST, but also because it's coincided with lower dividend from RBI and losses or whatever lower revenues for telecom companies. So in that sense, I think it is somewhat forgivable that this year that they missed the deficit target. But for over the longer term, like you pointed out, there is no anchor, right? I mean, we don't know what exactly the government is going to focus on. They give a roadmap for 2 or 3 years, and then after that, we don't know what is going to happen. So like you said, I think they have to take a view on the FRBM report, even if they don't fully agree with it, if they want to tweak it, which is fine, but at least they should give out their views and probably propose a new FRBM legislation, which will hopefully be more robust than the current one. I think that would give a lot of comfort to the market and also a sense that even if for 1 or 2 years, because of the structural transitions like GST, we have a miss on the revenue side, at least over the medium term, the government will be back on the right track. Now, as far as your other question of growth versus fiscal prudence, I think the big issue is anyway, I think the mix of spending or the quality of spending, and I would even question the bandwidth of the government to kind of undertake and implement large projects. I think over the last many years, we have seen that it's not possible for the government to do such things. Most of the spending is essentially revenue spending. It's interest payments and salaries and pensions. So, and whatever limited increase in investment spending, which you've seen year after year, is not going to make much of a difference. So I think fundamentally there has to be some root and branch reform on the government side in terms of how money is spent, in terms of how much decentralization is needed in spending this money. I think without that just juggling around the numbers is not going to be too much of a help.
Okay. Well, point taken, gentlemen. You'll have put so many points on the table, not possible to discuss, do justice to everything in a half-hour show. But thank you very much for joining us on this maiden Economist Roundtable on the growth deficit balance. Key takeaways, our panelists would like the government to focus on growth, but that need not necessarily come by making it a wider fiscal deficit. They're asking for more ground-level reforms like labor reform, like credibility of numbers, and more importantly, taxing what should have been taxed all the while, long-term capital gains made on shares. The more important point is a larger fiscal deficit number will be swallowed, provided there is an anchor for the remaining years. There is a promise of how fiscal prudence will be achieved over the next 5 years. So some comment on the FRBM report is what our panelists want. With that, we wrap up this special show, The Growth Deficit Balance. Thank you very much for watching.